Stu, thank you so much. And on that note, let's hear from some of the subject experts about this value of community sport. I'm delighted to welcome our panel to the stage. Would you put your hands together, please, for Adam Berry, Deputy Secretary, New South Wales Office of Sport; Laura Cowell, Deputy Mayor, Sutherland Shire Council; Carol Mills, Centre for Sport, Business and Society at UTS; and Hugh Piper, Assistant Director, Research and Insights at Office for Social Cohesion. Please make them very welcome. And thanks to all of you for joining us this morning for this chat. And Carol, I'd like to start with you. It was mentioned your input and importance in this document that we have in front of us today. Talk to us about the research behind the values in the report. It was led by you. What was the most compelling or perhaps surprising finding, if you like, in your research into exactly what the value of community sport is?
Thank you. Firstly, can I say it was really exciting to have Sport New South Wales come to us about this project. We do a lot of work and research in sport, and my background is in sport in many different capacities over more decades than I'd like to recall. But it was one of the first times people have come and said, we really want to look at the focus of community sport. We do a lot of work on economic assessment to do with major events, the Olympics, World Cups and so on, and grand finals, the big high-end elite sport. But actually at grassroots level, we talk about the importance of it as a feeder to elite, but we don't often talk about it for its value in its own right. And I think that was the most exciting part about this, to be able to demonstrate, as has just been eloquently put by the CEO, the number of things that actually have a direct benefit from community sport involvement. And I think that's the most important thing. I think the other thing about the findings, I suppose, is to re-emphasise the fact that sport is a system and it needs endorsement, resourcing, governance and commitment right across, whether it be appropriate playing fields, which councils have such a key role in, sorry to put you on the spot, through to training and support for people who are volunteers and board members. We need coaches, we need administrators, we need a whole raft of things in order for the system to work well. But what this also showed in the report was that investment is repaid tenfold, 20-fold, 100-fold, because an investment in a strong sport organisation and a strong sport system really pays dividends against so many characteristics and features of a society that we now are able to quantify. And I think that's the important message. Lots of impact from small investment, but it must be across a whole lot of different areas and it must be sustained.
Indeed, Carol, that's a wonderful segue to my next question, because the report does quantify $34.7 billion in annual social health economic impact, social health and economic impact, which is absolutely huge. And Adam, can you talk to us from a New South Wales government perspective? How does a report like this help shape the funding and policy decision making?
Thanks, Steph. So important. So instructive to have literally the one page and the song sheet that we can all sing from across the sector on the benefit we bring. And government is very interested, as Stuart alluded to, in performance and wellbeing frameworks demonstrating health outcomes. And so now we have a collective opportunity using the work that's been done to be able to bring voice to what it is that we do. Because what we have is a complex system, an ecosystem we're part of, and previously complex messages. I think it gives us the opportunity to have some very simple messages that demonstrate things that are really important to government. So I think that is one of the great benefits of the report. So we're really excited to see it.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Adam. Laura, you wear a couple of hats. We've said the Deputy Mayor of Sutherland Shire Council is your official title for today, but you're President of Sutherland Shire Football Association as well. So you're in a wonderful position to talk to us about focusing on councils as frontline investors in sport infrastructure, but how do you see community sport contributing to, let's call it, livability and social connection?
Thank you. And thank you for having me here today. I have to say I'm extremely excited to see everyone's thoughts in evidence base that we can use moving forward. So well done and congratulations. One of the reasons I'm in council and have this interesting role is because of sport and what is lacking at community level. We need to have an active lifestyle, and I think COVID proved the necessity for having outdoor spaces, and the ability for people to connect either through volunteering or in a organised community sport. And so at council level, what is really important is to have these strategies and documentations and evidence to be able to get funding directed into those areas. So I think one of the first things we did at Sutherland Council when I came on and was elected to be part of the councillor team was to put together a sports strategy so that we were able to present the need of the community. And I was so surprised when I got on council that they didn't have that in order to be able to get investment directed into the right areas. So the sports strategy was in place, and we now have a very clear pathway for investment into sport within the Sutherland Shire through the council, and are able to redesign the facilities and structure from a council level in preparation for times like this, when the Beyond the Game data helps support the state government and potentially federal government in investing into those local areas, so that we have a project ready to go for active lifestyle and sport.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. I could see Hugh nodding along to a number of things that you mentioned there, and this report does highlight the role of sport in building belonging and connection. We've heard it from all our speakers this morning, Hugh, but can you tell us from a social cohesion lens, why is community sport such a powerful vehicle for inclusion?
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's a very appropriate question. Before I answer, I want to congratulate Carol and Stuart on a fantastic report, and thanks for hosting all of us today. Look, as a former very mediocre cricketer and even more current mediocre runner and rower, the report certainly resonates both personally with me, but also with the work of the office. We know that building connection, building relationships between people, between groups, and especially relationships that traverse differences, that allow people to come together in spite of different identities and to form connections that are lasting, that are durable, and that contribute towards the collective good of society, is inevitably good for the social cohesion. We know that social cohesion is under strain in Australia, in Sydney, in New South Wales at the moment. Our earlier speakers, the Minister, the Chair, spoke about the tragic events in Bondi. And as tragic as those events were, at the same time, we saw that sport played a really important role in the response and the way in which people, I guess, worked through the grief of the moment. We saw the tremendous outpouring of affection and love from the Randwick Rugby Club, when unfortunately one of their members, Peter Marr, was one of the victims of the attack. We saw the tremendous, ceremony and that first day at the SCG. I was fortunate to be there that day as well. We saw the enormous power that sport at both that kind of elite level can have to bring us together and be a unifying source. I think the challenge now is to think about, well, how can we be more deliberate and purposeful in making and helping sport play this kind of cohesion, connection building role in a super consistent way that actually traverses and brings people together in spite of, or indeed maybe even because of their differences, and build connections that last over the long run.
Absolutely, Hugh, thanks. Also, when we talk about being more deliberate, can we actually see a growth in that in the future? Because, Carol, the report does measure the current economic, social and health returns. Is there room for growth? Where's it going to come from?
There's room for huge growth. We've seen, I think the Minister mentioned women's sport in his presentation. We've seen tremendous growth in the number of women and young girls playing sport. I think the boundaries are set by our capacity to actually accommodate the people who want to play sport. It means we need fields, we need playing services for people to participate, we need clubs that are strong. I think the demand is just going to accelerate. I see opportunities, we sometimes talk about them but don't often take them from major events. So we've got a number of major events on our doorstep, either within a week, within a couple of years, and we really need to think about what we always see after those is an influx of increased interest, but we don't always have the capacity to maintain it. And so we've got to really think about a strategic plan for sport that can accommodate growth effectively. Yes, the potential's there, but it requires everyone in this room and all the players who support sport to actually come together with, as was said in Stuart's presentation, with a strategy to actually sustain a growing system, not just a static system.
Yeah, the places and spaces conundrum is something that's ever present, isn't it, in community sport? Adam, could we tap into other portfolios? We heard it mentioned earlier, the alignment with health, education and various other parts of government. Should we do that better to maximise impact?
Yeah, I think we need to. And that goes for us as an organisation and everyone in the room as well. And we are trying to start to do that. Minister talked about the domestic, family and sexual violence partnership that we have, funded by Communities and Justice. We have the Run My Way, funded by Transport. So we are definitely actively reaching out to other organisations because we are increasingly trying to use sport as the vehicle to achieve their outcomes. I think the social cohesion piece is something that we need to project outside of our own ecosystem. Throughout everything Stuart said and everything Chris said and everything the Minister said, everyone in this room nodded because we know and we understand the opportunity, the need, the obligation is for us to be taking that outside, and that's the other agencies, the other organisations, the other partners, and some of those ones that we've established, they are small and modest, but they are growing as they succeed, and we hope to continue to do that and broaden that out. So yes, I think it's something that we're all going to need to do, and to speak frankly, in the constrained financial environment that we're all operating in, government's constrained, your sports is constrained, leveraging whatever we can from across other parts of the public service investment is it's just good sense.
Is there a way to better align those levels of government when we talk from community, local council, all the way up to federal government? Can we align them better for more productive outcomes?
Look, alignment's
an easy answer.
Alignment gets harder the more levels you have to go through, right? And we are trying to align through the ASC frameworks and the ASC strategies. I do think that one of the big challenges in that, trying to achieve that, is the complexity of the communication. And anywhere we can simplify our message and our needs and what we're trying to do as a sector, we do try and do that. So I would say we're already trying to do that alignment work, Steph. It's just hard to execute. Again, if I bring it back to the report, I think the report becomes a good vehicle for same page, same message, consistent sets of information going to key stakeholders across the sector.
Well, the report highlights the economic impact, Laura, but councils, I guess they also see the preventative health and social cohesion outcomes as well. It's something that was outlined in the legacy report from the FIFA Women's World Cup as well, how important that was and what the benefits were. But can you tell us at council level, how does that inform local decision making?
I would say that one of the things that I found at council is there's so many levels of strategy that are required to be put together to be able to have outcomes, that the health and wellbeing part of the goals and the strategy is because there's no direct alignment to sport until we had the sports strategy in place, it got a little lost in the various departments and the silos that can operate at local government area, and I apologise to local government, but they know my feelings. It is, when we talk about the communication piece between the governments, these goals of that come out of so much documentation and the likes of the Beyond the Game, to apply them into a local government area is a very difficult thing. So the establishment of the Sports and Active Communities Reference Group, which I chair, which brings together all the sports from in the Sutherland Shire to be able to have a quarterly review and look at our strategies that align to those goals. That helps at our local level to be able to make informed decisions and then communicate with state government where we need more funding or investment into our 900,000 volunteers across Australia. But, you know, we've got our highest volunteer rate in the Sutherland Shire, and when we think of burnout, that's the area that is getting burnt out. So it was nice to see one of the goals there to be organisational, because when you think of associations and Down, they're mainly run by volunteers, and that's where that health impact is.
And resourcing does get stretched. I don't think there's anyone in this room that wouldn't have experienced that in some way, shape or form. But can you tell us where community sport then sits in the priority list?
For me, at the top, we got an unheard of amount of funding invested in the Capital Works program for sport within the Shire. I think it was like $43 million for the 4 years. And that was solely and wholly because the priority was number one. At council level across, there's a number of different priorities. You can't just say the sport investment, because they look at, they do have the active communities and lifestyle as one of the core things, but sometimes, service delivery like picking up garbage bins is equally important at the council level. So it really takes that strong advocacy piece with evidence-based information to be able to really align local government to that piece.
Hugh, the Minister and Chris and Stu also touched on how important the social cohesion, the challenge to it is in a world like the one we live in, and the Bondi was mentioned and the incidents late last year, and how important it was that everyone came together to support each other. From the Office of Social Cohesion, I love that, by the way, what a great place to work. What emphasis do you put on sport as a tool for community building?
So we know that sport is a really important forum for connection. It's a really important forum for people building relationships, and relationships that last over time. One of the really important things that we think about is not only sustaining relationships, but also about what is the, infrastructure or structures or institutions that we can support or that we can encourage that enable those connections to exist over time. I think another really interesting angle, though, and something that we're thinking about very closely, is sports organisations, along with other, community organisations such as arts or cultural organisations as well, are in many ways forums and opportunities for people to learn how to engage constructively even when they have differences. And so something that we're interested in and that we're thinking about very closely is how can we support people to understand and develop the skills to manage conflict, to navigate differences and disagreements in a way that is actually productive and useful. And so sports organisations, like any other organisations, have differences of opinion within them. They have different views or aspirations about how they might be run. Those things are good. Differences of opinion are part of living in a democracy, living in a plural society. They should make us better by hopefully reaching, through the process of debate and argumentation, we reach the better or the right conclusion. However, we live, as Stephanie said, in a society, partly these are forces from within Australia, partially these are forces internationally that are largely beyond our control, that is increasing fragmentation, increasing polarisation in our society. So how can we help sports organisations, for instance, role model productive disagreement? How can we help sports organisations be sites where people learn really important skills about how to overcome disagreement and actually reach a kind of collective goal in an effective way? And then how can we aggregate those skills up to the sort of whole of society level so that we as a country can navigate disagreements that are inevitable and that are going to continue to happen, but in a much more productive and peaceful way over time?
Sounds really simple, Hugh. Could you share with us, do you have any specific plans for a way forward to do that?
Specific, no. At least that I can talk about in this forum. But look, we're constantly looking at specific programs that we can sponsor or that we can support to help build connection in communities. As a, national or Commonwealth level part of government, a lot of our role is less in terms of directly engaging with particular communities in that way. It's more about how can we coordinate a consistent and effective approach at the state government and territory government level, and also at the local government level. It's really important that that governments at the sort of subnational level have the opportunity to lead in an authentic, tailored way to their specific context and circumstances, but at the same time we can play a role, I guess, coordinating that and helping shape priorities and helping shape, I guess, the research and evidence that undersits that and informs their approaches.
That was beautifully specifically answered. Thank you very much indeed. And it's really important work. And I'm just wondering, Adam, could you tell us, if you're looking, say, 5 to 10 years into the future, what are the structural reforms or investment that's going to be required to help community sport have that impact?
5 to 10 years, I think some of the things are set out in the report, but I think the uplift of the organisational support program, I think we've spoken about using the sector as a lever to achieve outcomes. That is, to our thinking, one of the most effective and one of the most simple levers that can be pulled because it can build that capacity, it can build that capability. So we're very definitely thinking there. I think that as a sector, we're really at the very, very beginning stages of being better able to understand what our data about our sector is telling us about ourselves. We're really, really early doors there compared to where other sectors are, that we're much more foundational. So I think we almost don't know what we're going to find out about ourselves as we come to terms with data, membership data, participation data, infrastructure data. And I do think that there's a role for the Office of Sport to play there, trying to lift up and have a statewide view around facility needs and around participation trends. Everybody in this room, I believe, could articulate the top 5 infrastructure needs and facility needs for sport in New South Wales, based on personal experience. None of us can point to a data set that says this is the key need and this is why, and this is 2 and this is 4 and this is 11, and for it to be able to inform those discussions. So I think building data capability in the sector is something that we want to try and do. It's quite ambitious, to be honest, but it's something worthwhile, and it'll help us have that view about all those elements. The other piece, I think, is Carol mentioned it, we are very eyes up to the opportunity for Brisbane 2032, and what we need to do as the office is we need to bring other parts of government eyes up, because everyone's a little bit focused at the moment, understandably, on delivery of things that are just over the horizon. But there is, to a certain degree, that means we haven't got our eyes up enough to the opportunities 28, 29, 30, right out to 32, and then beyond that. So I think there's some of the things that organisationally we're going to try and look at in terms of next 5, 10 years.
Let's go from big picture to granular, Laura. If you take off your council hat and put on your president of your local football association hat, at the really human level, what stands out to you about what you see in community sport?
Yeah, so I always have my hats all on at the same time. And I think when I think of community level, we talk about volunteerism and the burnout. When we think of well-being and rolling out of programs from state association, from the government, the impact at local level is huge. We've got a really great state body for us at Football New South Wales, which you were a board member on, who helps support some of our association level. But as you keep going out to the 21,000 players, we've got 3,000 something teams, and you've got volunteers across, and you ask them to be compliant with, working with children, you ask them to be compliant with all of the child safe, which is all very important things. They've all got full-time jobs. They've all got to mark the fields on a weekend in a football. They've all got to try and find, a way to get their canteens open and stocked, and then it rains, and then, we're all over. But, it's like, I think one of the things is that we're really, at local level, and the impact, it is really significant. We're seeing a reduction of volunteerism, and people are less likely to put their hand up because the investment into So at Sutherland Shire, we actually do have a list, and we do know the priorities of what needs to be invested into for our ageing infrastructure and all of those great things. But what we don't have, and specifically in football, is the ability to understand, well, how can we actually strengthen our volunteers for the future? How can we make it accessible so that ageing infrastructure allows for the diversity that comes out with all the strategies and the accessibility required? That's a huge impact, and it's one that's continuing on, and that's why I like to see some of these outcomes is at organisation level and down to community sport, because the burnout is real. I mean, I work full time. I'm also a counsellor, and I'm also, president of football, and that takes its toll, and something has to give, and that's for most volunteers. They're all out there, and so I suppose coming out of this, seeing the investment into our local areas, not just looking at infrastructure, which is ageing across the whole of Australia, so we've got problems everywhere, but how do you invest in the person in a very real way, not just a release of some kind of you need to be compliant with this, or you need to do multiple 7 modules to be a member protection officer, and all those sorts of things.
Well, those challenges you mentioned about community football, I can see several former colleagues of Football New South Wales twitching. Stuart's triggering, isn't it? When we talk about the communities that come together, Hugh, in your experience, are there particular communities or demographics that benefit more than others from sport?
I think the short answer is that everyone can benefit from sport. And I think one of the actually really great points that this particular strategy makes, also the really important point that strategies at the Commonwealth level have made, is that the benefits of sport are not just around the actual game itself and the people who are actually directly participating in it. There's a whole infrastructure of people that we're just talking about who sit around that, and that those benefits of the community building, the relationship building, the understanding how to run and organise and bring people together, all of that engages people like right across different cohorts, whether that be in terms of age or different demographics. Of course, there are particular, functions or particular benefits in terms of connection building and community building and generating a sense of belonging, for instance, with people who might otherwise, be experiencing disadvantage or marginalisation. So it's very powerful effects of sport, of course, with both sort of recent and longer term migrant communities to Australia. We've seen the enormous contribution that migrant communities have had both at the kind of elite sport level in terms of representing this country, but also in terms of the diversification of sporting opportunities that exist here. My great passion when it comes to sport is cricket, and it's amazing to see how the face of cricket has changed at a community level so radically, with the sort of more recent migration waves of Indian, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, and people from the broader subcontinent. And it's really clear that in that instance, sport can be a forum for, changing a sport that maybe traditionally has been more monocultural in its identity, and evolving it into something that can actually be a forum for not only allowing people to participate and develop a sense of belonging and connection in a new community when they come to Australia, but as I said before, providing a space and an opportunity for people to come together in spite of their differences, and to exist beyond and build connections beyond, groups that they're already a member of.
Absolutely true.
Can I just jump in there, Steph?
Can jump in.
You said something at the start about everyone can benefit from sport. And I think our collective challenge is that, yes, but not everyone is able to. And those structural barriers that exist around cost and around culture, and sometimes around practices that could be more inclusive at a grassroots level, are some of the things that prevent the people that are most in need of accessing sport and getting the benefits from doing so. And that's the really actionable thing for me that we can all do, and that drives a lot of our approach in the office towards inclusion. towards removing barriers. So I just wanted to jump on that because that's organisationally very important to us and kind of also personally very important. So I think it is really actionable for all of us in our everydays through how we operate our organisations.
100%. Thank you, Adam. Carol, I do want to finish with you. Two-parter, and Adam's just touched on it. There's such a huge impact that community sport has, and that's not just on physical health, but on mental health as well, perhaps the one that affects the broader community. Do you feel that sport is recognised enough for that impact? And if not, how can we improve it?
Okay, I'm going to come back to your policy question because it links in. I was a very long-term bureaucrat, so that's one thing I know a lot about. And it answers your question as well. People who work in government aren't looking narrowly. People want to work together. The system makes it hard. It's no different than sports working in cooperatively. And one of the challenges we have in examples like mental health or the health data, which comes up as big chunks of the budget benefits that we've identified, is that it's about prevention. And a big challenge to get government agencies to have KPIs agreed to by government and ministers about prevention versus spending on an immediate issue, and a person presenting in an emergency ward with a heart attack versus funding someone who is going to play sport and therefore not have a heart attack is one of the biggest challenges we have. And I think part of the follow-up for this project is to say, we've quantified the benefits. We want now that to be recognised as a genuine part of government budgeting and expenditure and policy prioritisation. And part of that is getting the agencies to be given more lateral capacity to do that and to have, I know it sounds really boring, but KPIs that aren't just about how many people presented and how quickly did I service them in the ER ward, but how many people through health budget being diverted to prevention actually prevented me needing so many people in an ER ward. And I think that's a really critical thing. So mental health is a really classic example where we've probably never had greater community awareness of the significance of it. We've probably never had greater awareness of its links to social cohesion, individual well-being, loneliness, all the factors that are now really high on our priority list as communities. How do we now use that information to tell the story that we can help prevent that, and that a small investment will actually bring a big dividend? And I think that's the challenge that we want to work with sport on, to take the narrative into the language of government, into the language of funding decisions and prioritisation, and really demonstrate this evidence shows you that there is a new pathway forward for funding things than we've had traditionally.
Okay, you answered the second part of my question already. So I guess in closing from this report, what's the key takeaway for all the stakeholders in this room? What can we all do to help amplify this report?
I'd love to see everybody tell everyone about reading it. That's the first start. Nothing like a report sitting on a shelf is not a good report, right? So the first thing is for people to think about it and in a way use the examples you've just given. How can I help? How can I think about what I can do through my club or through my organisation or through my role that it can actually both use this information but actually also contribute to it. We've got 5 recommendations that have been developed by Sport New South Wales. They're very tangible. The volunteering one, the infrastructure one, they are tangible things that we need to take forward now, and it would be great to see some way in which sports can work together. And I think the other challenge for us is picking up your volunteering issue. A huge amount of sport is dependent on volunteer time. And we need to find ways of assisting volunteers to come together and learn from one another and have their voices as general sport contributors more easily heard. And I think that requires one action that can come from this is an energy for people to come together and cooperate, set up a process for sharing information, having a more united voice. Governments will hear more from a large voice than they will from lots of small voices. That's, again, the reality. So I think thinking tangibly, what I'd love to see as the next step is the board of Sport New South Wales, putting Chris on the spot, to really think about, okay, we've got some recommendations, how do we start to action them? What are the first steps we can take to bring the enthusiasm, the commitment and the knowledge that the sports community has to actually bring to fruition the recommendations?
Carol Mills, thank you very much. Laura Cowell, Hugh Piper and Adam Berry, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much. Adam, before you run away, sorry, I knew I wouldn't catch you before you stepped off. I'm just going to